Good morning. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us discussing the ongoing drought in the country. And let's now link up with the Garissa County Governor, Nadif Jama, who is joining us from the county of Garissa. Governor, greetings to you again. Earlier on, we had a technical glitch, but my question was on the collaboration your county administration is making with the national government, state and non-state actors to alleviate the severity of the drought affecting thousands in Garissa County.
Oh, yes, indeed. First of all, let me say thank you very much to Citizen TV for this opportunity. Allow me to share my, the situation on the ground. Yes, indeed, we are going through very, very difficult times with regard to the drought, not just only in Garissa County, but in the entire region of northern Kenya. Of course, I heard earlier a colleague in the studio saying about 12 counties. That's true. And I think if you asked me really what we are doing, obviously we are doing whatever we can, notwithstanding the circumstances that we are finding ourselves in as a county. And I know also this is the reality with my colleagues also in the other counties. What we are facing, of course, without belaboring the point, is a situation whereby we've not had rainfall for 3 consecutive, if not more actually, failed rains, and it's terrible. I think it's really a situation whereby we have not only seen in the last season and the one before large numbers of livestock perishing. And we are now also seeing a similar situation actually happening. We've already seen a large number of livestock already dead. Our concern now, as we go forward, is the number of people, as confirmed by Red Cross, 378,000 people who are facing severe starvation, and we actually are concerned that we may actually see. We will also start losing out lives, human lives for that matter. In terms of really what we are doing as a county, and this also goes for the other counties, because I'm aware we talk. The best we can do for now is to do water tracking to the extent that we can. To do bits here and there regarding taking foodstuffs to the people in the rural parts of the county. But really that's not enough. We've heard about 10 days ago NDMA officials here to help us with water tracking in particular. Obviously they can only do so much, but it's never enough. I think the reality that what we really now we're looking forward to is for the president to announce this now as a national disaster. And the earlier that's done, the better, because if not, really, I think it's just very, very unfortunate. We want to see, hopefully, more donor institutions coming on board to help us with the situation.
All right, Governor, you've actually talked about something that you, together with other governors from the northeastern region, spoke about just a few days ago in Mombasa County, wanting the government to declare this a national disaster. This was done last year by President Uhuru Kenyatta around September. I mean, what change of strategy are you looking out for? What difference are you looking out for in terms of interventions by the national government as leaders from the affected regions?
Well, obviously, if the government comes on board to appreciate that we are facing a national disaster, certainly we will expect the government to come full-blown, with all kind of support. The national government has a bigger budget than we have. The national government has far bigger resources than we can pull together, particularly so with the support that the national government probably can pull from the donor institutions, the bigger donor institutions. I must say at this juncture something that actually is unfortunate, because this drought also is coming at a time when we as county governors are taking over, and therefore we are passing through a transition period. You see, we haven't even got our first allocations, yet paid as incoming governors. So you can imagine a situation like this whereby you'd not even have, to say so, even a penny for that matter, for this kind of initiatives. So really, it's coming in at a time when we are indeed disadvantaged in terms of the transition we're going through, in terms of resources, and therefore, for the government, for the national government to chip in is timely, and the earlier that is done, the better for all of us.
All right. Governor, you come from a region that is not new on the list of counties that have been affected by the perennial drought in the country. I believe even as part of your campaign strategy, you must have put this as your main focus, because coming from that region, understanding the challenges in that region, tell us a bit more about the sustainable solutions that you have on the table as a governor in one of the affected regions, because allocations and more allocations year in, year out, experts are saying is not economically sustainable, Governor.
Thank you. A very, very good question. In fact, we had a meeting about a week ago in Mombasa, and we also met as governors from the FCDC counties. FCDC, of course, stands for Frontier Counties Development Corporation, and we actually were discussing even prior to the COG, conference in Mombasa. We were discussing as to really what are the long-term solutions. We had a brief meeting with the World Bank country directors. And what we have said is there must be, as you said rightly, long-term solutions. And I think among the issues we discussed at length and which we will continue discussing is, dryland farming. Interventions that will be long-term for our people, by doing farming in our counties. Farming that is, targeting, drought mitigation for that matter. We would be able to be using whatever waters available, whether river waters, if that would be the waters available, whether using aquifers, that maybe we can tap into, so that we start the, big initiatives or big schemes for that matter of dryland farming in the most affected parts of our counties, such that our people can not only have fodder for their livestock, but also food for those who are affected. So yes, indeed, we are talking. We've started now talking in a big way as FCDC governors. I was also recently, obviously, as you're aware, I got the opportunity to be heading the ASAL committee of the Council of Governors, and we hope, with all this put together, we will be actually, launching big approaches to the donor institutions globally, so that we have, indeed, as you rightly say, longer-term solutions to what is these perennial situations.
Okay, excuse me, Esther Muiruri, I come to you. What we have at the moment is 4 consecutive failed rain season, and predictably we are looking or are likely to experience a 5th one, as per the earlier account given by the NDMA representative, that's Amos Nyakeo in studio. The consequence is what we obviously talk about, livestock dying, reduction in crop production, lack of milk for children, and lactating women having impact on nutrition. Then how do we scale up investment on early action mechanisms? Because this is a lengthy process. This is going to be a long, winding route for both state and non-state actors.
Yeah. Let me also start by mentioning, contributing to what you had asked Deputy Director Amos earlier about why does it seem that we are not getting things right. I think there's also need for us to understand that there are also external factors. For example, the climate change, and it is not a unique phenomenon only affecting Kenya. It's affecting all the countries globally. But also what we know is that especially the Horn of Africa is bearing more extreme of the climate change impacts. And that's why we are seeing more recurrent drought periods. Even when you look at what happened since 2011 up to today, we have had different episodes of drought happening. And now this is like summing up it all together. So in as much as there has been a lot of progress towards understanding the drought risk in this country, we also have to understand what is happening outside our own efforts, which are external factors. What do we need to do to upscale the anticipatory action? I think one, as an organization, we've been working very closely with the NDMA, the county governments and the national government. First of all, to work on the policies and legal frameworks, because those are some of the basic structures that support institutionalization of some of these practices. Other than that, we've been working through advocacy and collaborating with the different government agencies and state actors to enhance our coordination and to co-produce our advisories. Particularly, we work with we have done a lot of progress between KMD, early warning information, when they released the weather forecast. Mm-hmm. We have seen a lot of progress in terms of timely release of maybe different weather products, which never used to exist before. Through that process of collaboration, being able to work together and plan ahead, we are seeing a lot of shift even within the government agencies, but also within non-state actors, including Kenya Red Cross. So we are seeing a situation where we are able to look at what is it that we can be able to get from KMD 3 months earlier, and make a projection and how that will impact different sectors, key sectors, and together as stakeholders, particularly through the National Climate Outlook Forum, mm-hmm. we come together to understand what is this forecast is telling us and what do we need to do. Already we have gone through that process for this oncoming season, where we were able to sit together and come up with advisories per sector. And that is what is now guiding us when it comes to immediate interventions that need to be actioned, both at the institutional level, but also at the community level. And part of it is to enhance awareness creation and dissemination of this information to the farmers, to the pastoralist, to the common person on the ground, so that they can be able to know this is what projections look like for the next 3 months, and this is how I'll be affected at the household level. So we're also looking at a situation where people can be able to take up their own individual actions to cushion themselves. And with that, we have been very key to build that capacity, particularly by establishing local village committees on disaster risk reduction through a participatory process where they are able to map out what are some of the risks that affect them. And not only drought, because drought is just one risk, but we are faced by several risks in this country. And throughout this process, what we have learned is that we cannot only focus on one risk and ignore the rest. So we are downscaling that approach from an institutional level to a local level, where people are able to map out several risks, be able to analyze how they affect different components of their day-to-day and social structures. And from that, they can be able to come up with an action plan, which stakeholders and even them, they can be able to do something about it. So I think in the long term, that is something that needs to be enhanced, and breaking the barrier between community understanding the climate information, early warning information, mm-hmm. but also being able to strengthen our institutional capacity to support early actions.
Esther, you've talked about climate change, and this has been the elephant in the room. Every time we're talking about issues such as drought, it's always climate change as one of the biggest contributors. And of course, one would ask then, if climate change has been such a big problem and has caused erratic weather conditions that have led us to where we are as a country, We have other countries that are desert countries, yet they're the biggest exporters of food. I would cite examples of countries such as Egypt, where there are success stories about how agriculture has thrived despite the unfortunate weather conditions in that country. I want to believe Kenya is at a better place. What is it that has failed in our systems or our way of life or our interventions that make us, incapable of embracing some of the mechanisms that have worked elsewhere?
Yeah.
Because this seems like it's a situation that is here to stay, at least for now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we are in different levels as communities and as different states when it comes to different sectors, development. And I think why we are severely affected is because we do have less coping capacity, particularly when you look at the counties being affected and the livelihood options that they do have. They are very prone to climate-sensitive impact. And I think in the long term, we need to integrate structural interventions with non-structural interventions. And in this, I'm looking at, we need to look at some of those best examples from some of those countries and be able to bring those home. But I think also this is accompanied by resources. Okay. And what we have seen also is that there has been also significant reduction of resources, both at even, I think, government collection level, we've seen that, but also from a humanitarian perspective. We have had other crises coming up throughout this period, particularly in other countries where we did not expect some of these things to happen. And so some of the resources that could have been channeled to undertake some of interventions have been diverted elsewhere. But I think it's an opportunity for us to learn as a country what is happening and best practices elsewhere and be able to domesticate that to our communities. But also it is important for us to invest a lot in behavior change, particularly being able to engage the communities, particularly around the change of livelihood options or uptake of new technology. I find that very challenging because people have a lot of attachment to their own traditions. Okay. And some of these interventions will mean that they have to open up to uptake some of these practices that they have never done before.
Sort of embrace the new normal. Yeah, the new way of life.
It seems a hard departure point to embrace. I mean, changes that agencies like or stakeholders like Red Cross are willing to roll out to those who are affected. Amos, I'm sure you want to comment on this. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, I like what Esther is saying. Climate change is real. We've seen drought cycles becoming shorter and shorter. In the past, you would comfortably go 10 years without seeing a major drought. Nowadays, if you see 4 years before another drought, you are very lucky. Then that means we need to redouble our efforts on our capacities to cope with the droughts, as opposed to capacities to respond. And drought is basically lack of water. And now the issue that we should deal with is how we harness whatever water that we have and channel it to where we have deficits. Look at the Tana River, for example. It traverses how many arid and semi-arid counties? Quite a number. To what extent have we harnessed the Tana River for purposes of addressing the deficits associated with challenged water access? I keep citing the case of the Yatta Faro. If you go to Kidimani, any time of the year, you will find fresh produce. Why? Because the Yatta Faro has been able to get water from Chania River to the communities along that furrow, and they are able to produce throughout the year. Why can't we replicate this? Why can't we invest in capacities that avail water to distances that are longer than what Yatta Faro is delivering right now.
But so, Amos, just hang on. When you mention the counties, because you have talked about the example of the Tana River, and what we have a devolved system of government or units across the country that are severely affected. For example, the counties that we have cited, we have Garissa, for example, the governor is here, Turkana, Samburu, Wajir, Marsabit, Isiolo. Where is the vision from this leadership of the counties to harness water and use it for irrigation purposes? Because water is the common denominator here. If we have water, we are good to go. Do you solely attribute it to a leadership problem?
I wouldn't attribute it to leadership, especially political leadership. For me, I would look at it from the technical perspective. How much advice are we availing to the political leadership? So I think the gap that might be there is the technical leadership. Can we design projects and programs that will be enticing enough to the political leadership with very clearly outlined benefits, sure benefits to the communities? And any politician will buy into a project that has potential to attract votes for them. So for me, I would say that we need really to look at how we channel some of the resources, because studies have shown that anytime you spend $1 on resilience building, you are basically saving $9 that you would incur in response. So then it means we need to harness the Tana Basin, we need to harness the Athi Basin, we need to harness the Kerio River, the Takwel River, the Wasonyiro, the swamps that we have. We need to harness the Merti Aquifer so that we are able to access water. Okay. And luckily, as a country, we have access to a lot of green energy. Wind and solar energy is abundant in the Asal counties. And then couple that with some gravity, and you can surely deliver water from some of these water sources to unimaginable distances. Okay. For me, it's a shame when 10 kilometers from Tana River, people will be saying they don't have water. Indeed. It shouldn't happen.
Let's now engage with the governor on that. And Safin, earlier on you raised a very important point. And this is on climate change. What we had witnessed last year in November, that was in the Scottish city of Glasgow, where world leaders have met and made pledges and commitments. We had our own version here in Makueni County, where it was themed multi-level governance for climate action, and county governors were present. Let's now get the account of the governor. And Governor Nadif, you were not the governor then, but in November last year in Makueni County, the heads of the county units had congregated alongside stakeholders, including donors like embassies here in Nairobi County. But then beyond the pledges made, what commitment will counties make, for example, those who have been severely affected, and Garissa in this case included in your case, in terms of budgetary allocation, in terms of programs that will alleviate the burden of the drought upon the thousands who are affected?
Let me say this. First of all, let me appreciate what the earlier speaker. I haven't got his name, but he spoke very well. He said that we can do a lot in terms of harnessing whatever water is available to us as dry, as you know, Asal counties. And I want to agree with that. But again, this is something that requires huge investments. What I want to say is, first of all, it's easy to throw blame games on really who is responsible, or who should be responsible, or who should do more than the other. But I think what we need here is, collective effort by, the national government, our national government. The global donor institutions are also responsible, or should be responsible, in supporting what we are facing, which indeed is the long story of climate change. What we need is less talk on these matters and indeed real action. The county governments that I, for instance, represent one of them, we're still very young in our history. We're still young. This is only the third, county government that we are beginning. And every year we do so much ourselves in terms of trying to mitigate, the circumstances that we face with these drought situations. But there's only so much we can do. I think what we need now is, as I was saying earlier, yes, indeed, we can harness the whatever water available to us, and the colleague has rightly mentioned, that as a long-term, solution. But that requires investment. Can we therefore pull our efforts together as not only county governments, national government, the international community, the World Bank, and all the major donor institutions should come forward so that we can indeed put together our minds for real, resilient and permanent solutions. And they are there. Each of us as county governors, when we were campaigning, it's not just campaigning, by throwing words around, but we mean well for our people and for our legacy. We have in our reports each county, and I'm saying this because I know what we have been discussing as FCDC governors, as ASL governors. We have solutions. We have outlined solutions for our counties, and they all look like similar. I mentioned, for instance, my plans for 3 major dryland farming initiatives in Garissa County. One of them along the Tana River that the colleague mentioned. Another one in the Merti Aquifer in the northern part of the county, and so forth and so on. So we have we have the plans, we have the ideas, but the investment required is well beyond what, for instance, my budget as a county governor, can accommodate.
All right.
So we want some sincere, serious, support that should come forward quickly, instead of a lot of talk and a lot of conferencing and a lot of really time being wasted on discussing global warming or climate change. Those are realities now. We know them very well.
All right.
Well, the question is, how much do we need to do? How fast can we move?
Governor, just to follow up on what you've said, of course, you've talked about some of the things that you cite as sustainable solutions. But if you look at Garissa County, about 480,000 people who could be watching you right now, majority of them did not have anything to eat last night. And they want to understand from their new governor, what missed opportunities have you already identified in terms of those sustainable solutions? And what are you going to prioritize in the next 5 years in terms of the short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions?
Well, I've already said that. I mean, other than, of course, my plans within my manifesto, within my development plans to, uplift the local economy in different ways. Because that itself also is important. And in as much as we are talking about people suffering in the rural parts of the country, i.e. my pastoralist populations. But I also have already a large number of people who lost their livestock and they have moved to the town. So a big initiative that, of course, I am bound to embark on is, first of all, to ensure that we also create some strong, sub-county economic interventions, urban interventions for that matter. But beyond that, of course, for the rural parts of the county, I've mentioned that we have big ideas for dryland farming, irrigation farming for that matter, so that we can create schemes, livelihood schemes, so that we can be having, big chunks of lands where we can irrigate to create, to grow both food and food for our people. So we do have plans, and I think this is where I'll request that the donors, some of them hopefully who are listening to us, to come forward and work with us, because whatever ideas we may have, we can only sustain them to the extent that our budgets can allow. But where really we believe we can be getting some support, the bigger donor institutions who indeed do have budgets for long-term intervention. So I call upon them to come forward and work with us as FCDC counties, as ASL counties. And we are available, we have ideas, we have very, very good ideas. We have very good plans for our people. But without the necessary capital, without the necessary investment, then it really, we will not do much.
All right, Governor, we'll be coming back to you in just a bit, just to continue with this conversation. But of course, remember, we are joined online by Sam Ombeki, the Senior Program Manager, CARE Kenya. We are talking about the economic burden, Ayub, and you see there the Governor talking about, we have good plans for our people, but we need investment, we need donors, we need money, in short.
And the coordination sort of needed. What the Governor echoed was to the real reality. He says that we need more for the long-term interventions and plans besides the allocations done by the National Treasury that pumps money into the counties, but they have other expenditures to pay for. However, let's now get the account of Sam Ombeki, who is the Senior Program Manager, CARE Kenya. And Sam, we earlier on lost you, and we apologize for the... Okay, CARE International, he is the Senior Program Manager, and thank you, Sam. Earlier on we lost you, but welcome back. I mean, going forward then, this seems it needs a lot of coordination from both governmental and non-governmental organizations. Going forward then, what are your plans? Because we are already into the season where, in terms of the projections by the Met Department, we are unlikely going to witness the rainy season in the October-December period.
Thank you. I also lost you guys, but I'm back. What I will want to say is that in terms of strategies to mitigate the drought, we are aware that drought is now there. It's very cyclic. Within every 3-5 years is there. I'm looking at it from a broader perspective. First, the allocation of funding to emergency. It's like we tend to do it even from the government when the disaster occurs. I think that should not be the case. We need to have sufficient funding going to that sector because emergencies are there. Secondly, for us who are the development partners, we need to prevail on our donors that when they are funding development-related activities, we need to have additional money, which we call crisis modifier, because when a disaster occurs, it negates the very achievements we have done. Therefore, we need also to have every funding, to have some additional money to take care of, to modify any crisis which comes on board. Another thing which I'm seeing which is missing is the community participation. When we talk of drought, there's no water. The fact is that water systems have to rely on the water catchment areas. How have we sensitized our communities about managing our water trust lands? Does the community link that the water which they see on the surface is the very water we need to retain to percolate to the pockets of the aquifers where we shall now access it through the boreholes? That linkage is missing. We are seeing now a lot of environmental degradation. Forests are going, and yet those are the sources of rain. We are seeing upcoming human settlements because of population. But the county governments need to develop some legal frameworks to regulate where should people be settled and where they should not settle. Otherwise, if we go settling them all over, we are encroaching to those areas which we rely on in terms of natural resources. There is a lot of water, as much as my colleague there has looked at the drainage areas, but also there is a lot of water inland. When it rains, maybe next time, a lot of it you will see going to the lagers. Lagers will be fed to the rivers. Rivers will take to the ocean. But if we can be able to develop systems and mechanisms like subsurface dams, the earth ponds, the sand dams, which we retain as much water as we could, maybe the longest we can prolong, maybe 6 months, retain our own water. And then we are seeing three things. There is the nurturing of the environment around there. There is the percolation of that water going to the aquifers. There is also the human and the livestock who are relying on that water. Therefore, let us think of also investing in the major dams. It has happened in Ethiopia and elsewhere, and where you mentioned maybe like Egypt, because before you release your water, because that's a blessing from God, let's make sure it stays with us long enough. When you look at our river Tana, it's 24/7 very brown. What does that mean? Water should not be brown. It means there's a lot of soil which is going to the river, and this is from arable land. This is our vegetative soil, the one which we are used for production, and it's just going. It means our uplands up there, we are not so serious about the conservation of our environment to ensure that we are not even losing our soil. That alone, it shows out of degradation of our environment. Therefore, we need to be proactive. I'm very happy the governor, our Excellency Governor in Garissa, he started looking at governance issues. He started with a water policy, which became a Water Act, which we need now to actualize. There is also, I think, a policy on livestock. There is a policy on the environment. There's a lot of good governance tools which have come up. Therefore, I think my request is that can we operationalize some of these policies and the acts such that we nurture our environment?
All right.
Thank you.
You've talked about so many important things. One that stands out for me talks about the environmental conservation as one of the way forwards for this, addressing this issue. I just want to understand from you, what practical way can we make this applicable, especially to the local communities? Because environmental conservation has been treated as a subject for the selected few. How do we make them understand and also just make it part and parcel of their daily living in a language and in a nature that they can be able to, embrace?
Yeah, I think water is one of the resources which was developed much earlier before devolution came on board. I think around 2008, we created some bodies, national bodies, which are cascaded down to the ground. For example, in terms of conservation, our water catchments, we have what we call the Water Resource Authority, which is at the national level. It is cascaded down to the community, to sub-catchment management committees, which are also called water resource users associations. Now, these structures are there, but we have not done any effort to ensure that they understand their role, what are they supposed to do, and also our mindset has been looking at the infrastructure, developing boreholes, and yet where these boreholes are tapping the water from, we are not thinking about it. Therefore, that linkage about the community, let them understand the water we see in a shallow well or in a borehole has been contributed from a forest nearby there. Therefore, we need to nurture it. We need to protect it. Therefore, that link, I think, is not so strong. And I'm sure with the development of a number of legal policies and the frameworks, some of those structures need to be legalized. We need to develop strong areas around the governance. And then from that time, the community will be part of this process. I think the mistake has been putting the community aside and we run alone without involving them as much. Thank you.
All right, Sam, before I let you go and come back to our guests, Amos and Esther in studio, just talk about the economic burden as well. Just in the last financial year, the government spent about 4 billion shillings in the hunger safety net program. We had another 950 million spent on the livestock offtake. Another 3.45 billion was spent on, provision of water. And of course, others that were allocated to the education and other sectors that were affected. But I just want to understand from you, do you think the country can keep up, considering the fact that there are projections that the numbers of those affected might increase by December? How do we address this cycle of economic burden in drought mitigation in the country?
I think the strategy for controlling droughts must start earlier now. For example, when you are along the Garissa roads, you will see a lot of bales of hay and the bales of fodder being transported from elsewhere to Garissa. Now, the question is, the same grass would be grown within Garissa, the napier grass and the like, which they can harvest and keep it, which is for a long-term measure against the drought. Another thing, like now we are expecting rains maybe later, inshallah, maybe later into the year. It doesn't come, but finally it will come. Have we prepared our water systems, for example, silting of the ponds, adding new ones, trying to make them much mega to ensure that we are going to harness enough water? Therefore, if we do that from the beginning, then by the time we have an emergency, we will find the resources going there would be much less because we are pushing ourselves against some of these effects. Okay.
Back to studio. And Amos, some points out very pertinent points, environmental conservation. And I'm sure this is a very of interest to you as an entity and also to the Kenya Red Cross Society. We have seen how debates evolved during the Mao conservation debate in Parliament, to the extent that we had seen the involvement and advice given by the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP, which is headquartered here in Nairobi County. But it all has to come down to the common man, the common person, in terms of this conservation, the need for participation. To what length and extent are you engaging the Kenyan people? Because conservation here seems to be very key going forward, as per the projections given now that we are unlikely going to have the rainy season happen October, December.
Thank you. Community empowerment is an important aspect in addressing crisis. And when communities are empowered to be able to appreciate their own situations and also to identify their own opportunities, then they become masters of their own destiny. What NDMA does is to involve communities in participatory processes that enable them to identify their risks and then plan around those risks in a manner that they are able to develop risk reduction plans and contingency plans. And those risk reduction plans are the ones that inform the long-term investments that will transformatively change the situations in the rangelands, in the arsals in this country. It is important to appreciate that right now the biggest burden on rangeland resources is the excessive capacity. When you compare what is the available capacity and the kind of livestock populations that we have, it's like we are exceeding the carrying capacity of these rangelands. So we need to start sensitizing the communities in a way that they are able to consider the carrying capacity of their rangelands so that they are able to retain animals that are of manageable populations, and then moving away from sentimental value of livestock, which in my view is what is actually happening right now, to commercial value of livestock, so that we commercialize. Can we see the pastoralists as investors and they put in place systems and mechanisms that enable their investments to become sustainable and they become profitable? As we speak now, you find that they will lose animals this drought. Next time again, they are losing animals again. Why? Because immediately it rains, they want to accumulate as many heads of livestock as possible. But then, when it gets to the signs are indicating that we are progressing to another drought, they want to cling to those animals, hoping that rains will somehow appear. And that is how we end up losing livestock to livestock deaths. Communities in the Sahel region have done community-managed rangeland regeneration successfully. And those places are drier than some of our arsal counties. We can replicate that here. It is possible. Okay. And then we also need to look at the opportunities for water harvesting. My colleague from Care Kenya mentioned that. I would want to cite an example. In Tana River, a place called Bulto Abarufa. About 6 years ago, we invested in a water pan at 20 million Kenya shillings. This was supported by the EU funding. And that water pan was able to carry that community with water all through for up to 5 years. It only dried this year because we've had an extraordinarily long dry spell. Imagine if we are using now $500 million. So far, we have used over $500 million for water tracking. And we are talking about 20 million changing the situation for Bulto Abarufa for over 5 years. Yes. So how many more Bulto Abarufas can we really do with $500 million Kenya shillings? Exactly.
And that is what we are talking about. I mean, replicating these solutions that have worked elsewhere so that we can have sort of a long-term sustainable solutions to the issue of drought. Esther, just to come to you also, just talk to us about how you're approaching the interventions in a hybrid sort of a mechanism, because your organization has also spearheaded some of the interventions on the affected communities. Talk to us about, you know, as far as you're doing the emergency response, what else is also included in that looks at the future ahead?
Yeah, for Kenya Red Cross, we have an integrated approach to our programming. We are not only looking at one sector alone, and in this we have interventions cutting across water supply, hygiene and sanitation, ensuring that we have maybe rehabilitated strategic water boreholes or have dug new water boreholes, and more than just bringing the water to the community, we are also enhancing the capacity of the water management committees at the village level to manage the water facilities for long term, because one of the things we realized was once you bring the water and you don't build the capacity to manage that, then the sustainability of that water system is in question. But beyond that also we have integration of other interventions like in the livelihood, agriculture and livestock sector, where we are supporting communities with early maturing crops, also drought-resistant crops, and integration of rangeland management practices, including strengthening the rangeland management committees by training them, doing training, but also enhancing their own bylaws within the committees. Okay. Other than that, we are also integrating other sectors like the policy, because we realize like policy is really important to ensure that structures are supported within, the community structures are supported within the county government governance structure. And beyond that, we're also implementing climate smart agriculture interventions. Particularly, I'll give an example of Tana River County, where we are working with different farmer groups, including pastoralist, initially pastoral communities, okay, to integrate agroforestry and fruit farming and forestry growing within their crop farming activities. And that is also integrated with the provision of water supply to the farms. Because, again, one of the challenges we have is over-dependent on rain-fed agriculture. So if we can be able to integrate some of these interventions, then we can be able to reach more. But allow me to also say that in terms of emergency response, again, it's something that we cannot really run away from, because what we can be able to do to mitigate some of the adverse impacts when we have an imminent disaster or an imminent hazard likely to come, there are likely impacts that still will require some immediate support. Okay. And from this drought, we are seeing us have been able to respond to close to 1 million people in this country, and we are looking at scaling up the interventions across different sectors, like I have mentioned, to reach to about 1.2 million people. And like Deputy Director Amos mentioned, the cost for this response is around 3 billion shillings. And if we can be able to use these resources, particularly to invest on long-term programming, and part of our plan is to integrate agricultural interventions and early recovery actions within this response.
Thank you.
Because we need to enhance the capacity of these communities as we are providing them with immediate support, relief, food aid or cash transfer. We need to also look at their livelihood and secure them. So those are some of the interventions we are currently undertaking.
Okay, and we understand that we don't have the Garissa County Governor on the security element. Then to get the account of Sam Ombeki, the Senior Programs Officer, Care International Kenya, and Sam, this scaling up of the intervention measures by both government and non-governmental organizations is meant to address the problem at hand at the moment. And in terms of talking about the security aspect, the scarcity which breeds conflict amongst people, and earlier on Amos talked about that, does it not further add an extra layer of complexity to this entire problem we have at hand?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I lost you guys, but I know the effects of drought, with the drought, we are looking at maybe destroyed natural resources, especially the two resources, water plus pasture. That's number one. We are seeing death of animals, meaning there's now destroyed the livelihoods for the people of northern Kenya. Without livestock, we are seeing nutrition deficiencies because there's no milk anymore. We are seeing food insecurity, and because of the emotional stress, we are seeing a rise of sexual gender-based violence because people are tired of having maybe families. You feel like they are a burden to you. That's another area. Because also the resources are destroyed, we are seeing social conflicts which are related to this. Therefore, in the way forward, CARE, and also by extension the Rapid Plus, which is under Medium Water Alliance, we are looking at water in the 4 aspects. Water for humanitarian, which now we are doing, also plus the county and everybody's doing that. We're also trying to look at water systems strengthening. We look at the governance. We are trying to look for sanitation and the water markets. We are trying to look at the behavior change in hygiene. And then also there is water for other multiple uses, water for agriculture, for food security. I want to echo our friend who said that Northern Kenya can be a food basket because it has happened elsewhere. Therefore, we can use the water we have there and do the modern technologies with the drip kit irrigations, which use a very small amount of water. We can improve on our food security there. There is also water resource management. It's another key area, and that's why most of our rivers are drying up, because we have not managed our catchment areas. I think that's the focus of Care Kenya, and I think the county government and the Millennium Water Alliance through the Swiss Development Corporation. Those are the key areas or sectors we are addressing. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sam, for that. And as we bring this to a close, we want to now just get to speak to the Governor of Garissa County, Nadhif Jama. What's your clarion call, Mheshimiwa?
Thank you. I think for me, this is a very, very important and a very, very, indeed, should I say, a topic that is dear to us in terms of how we need to tackle it. What I want to say is as follows, that we as the leaders of the ASL counties, we know what to do. We are not just people who wake up to see what's happening to our people every morning. We are leaders, we have obligations, we have duties, and therefore, my clarion call is for the world community to appreciate that continuous emergency interventions is not the solution. I like what a colleague has said earlier, that the water pump done for 20 million served better than millions being spent on emergency interventions. What we're saying, moving even beyond that, the amount of time and resources being spent by the so-called development agencies or partners. And I don't know why really, I sometimes get the feeling that the development partners, the non-governmental institutions, sort of prefer those short-term interventions as opposed to coming to sit with us and we talk about long-term sort of permanent solutions. And this is the way forward. As the chair of the ASL committee of the Council of Governors, as a key member of the FCDC counties, we will soon be calling for an international conference in one of our counties so that we can show the world what it is that we can solve our problems permanently. And we know it. And we will be asking for more or less of short-term interventions, emergency interventions, and we'll be asking for, if we are sincere, we'll be asking for quick, permanent, and we know the solutions. We know what they are. I mean, we know what we want to achieve for our people. We do not have a large number of population in our counties to the extent that we cannot do 3, 4, 5 major schemes to settle our people whenever. Droughts now up. I mean, talking about interventions short-term is no longer a solution. Let's come forward together and create, and we have the plans. We'll do for you the precisions you require. We'll chip in with whatever money we can do. We will chip in with whatever acts or legal issues you may require through our assemblies. But please come and partner with us, not for emergency interventions, but for long-term solutions. We know what it is that we want to achieve, and we'll help you to give you all that you may require. But let's come with that approach, not just continuous emergency interventions which are not taking us anywhere. I mean, for instance, when I was a governor, I did here more than 50 water pans. But I mean, again, that can only help so much, because if you do a water pan and the rains fail for one season and the other season, there'll be no water in those pans. For instance, now we have almost, we have no water pan at all with any water. I mean, by and large. Okay. I mean, it doesn't help. What helps is some permanent interventions which we know what they are, we know how to go about them, we have the ideas and the plans, and my clarion call is to call on our development partners, and for that matter, the national government to come forward. We can even talk about how we can do a canal from the Tana River to the northern part of the county, and that's where mostly a lot of mitigation is required. But again, all that requires investments. And therefore, my current call is, let's please now move forward to more of serious permanent interventions as opposed to continuous short-term emergency interventions.
All right, thank you so much, Governor. And Nadif Jama there saying that they have the plan. Yes. They know the permanent solutions. All they're calling for is investments and a partnership with the national government going forward. And let's now take a look at the feedback on Twitter. That is the hashtag on Twitter Daybreak, and here are some sampled feedback of viewers, and we thank you for sending them. A poorly coordinated crisis and caveats, this viewer says, that is Mushori, management in the face of drought will no longer suffice. A well-planned approach that focuses on the impact of drought is needed now. All right, from Kinyo Mushoki there, we have one by Lazaro. Kenya should adapt new technologies of dealing with the natural calamities, such as droughts. More than 50 years of independence, and we are still waiting for rainwater instead of modern methods of irrigation. And this viewer, Bobo Wino, says, drought crisis is an act of God, which makes it unsustainable calamity. The only way, he says, to deal with it is by assisting people living in the affected areas with their necessary needs. All right, and we have another one here by Shadrach Kagaki. I think it is time to cluster counties according to comparative advantage and then implement one county, one product strategy to improve agri-food productivity. Thank you for that feedback. And a viewer from Garissa, that's where we had the governor from, says he's the special programs officer of the county of Garissa, and says while Abnur Ole Hassan, while we appreciate all those involved in the drought response, there's need for more concerted efforts, he says, in providing safe water, food, fodder for livestock, and upscale cash transfer to the affected families. All right, the final one there. Ask the panelists on their own understanding, why is the government and the specific organizations always look not prepared for this drought crisis year in, year out, as the situation gets worse and worse as the years go by? What is the lasting solution? Thank you for that. I believe that is part and parcel of what our panelists have been talking about. And we'll be coming back to them for final comments before we wrap up the show. And this one says, I mean, this is a viewer, Rich, when... there seems to be a breakout. When the government and the responsible organizations be like 80% ready to tackle the drought crisis, because over the years they look not really prepared, yet they got an ideal on a looming drought over the years. This is what we talked about in terms of the predictions given by agencies, including the Kenya Met Department, who you talked to yesterday. All right. Now, time for a quick break. A quick break, and then when we come back, we wrap up Daybreak. Stay tuned.